Hello and welcome to The Found Cause, where we found our cause in serving the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm Michael, the man behind the machine, and to my right, your left is...
Sebastian, the archivist.
Wow, it's been a while, Sebastian. New jobs, visits to Spain. My children getting in the way, so lots has delayed us, but I promise you we haven't been doing anything. It's not like the podcast is flying out of the ground, it's just we've been doing stuff. I feel like the camera's feeling different too. The setup should be the same, but we look high def.
Yes.
I guess a slightly different lighting setup. In any case, welcome. If you haven't talked to us in a while, if you haven't seen our episodes, because we haven't been posting, it has been a little bit. We thought for today's episode, this is not particularly theological, although we're going to make it theological because we are a Christian podcast. Mm-hmm. We had previously done an episode just recently on communism. Mm-hmm. And how would you review this? What inspired this communism episode?
The underlying question, should a Christian be communist? Mm-hmm. Or can you adopt that as a political system ideology? The conclusion was, spoiler, no. Watch that episode to get the full review of the history of communism, what it actually proposes, and I try to be as fair as possible. I did study political science, so it is something that really interests me, and I want to portray that ideology as fairly as possible. Yeah. Let me know how I did in the comments below in that episode. And ultimately, the greatest downside of Marxism, as Marx proposed, is that he proposes taking away private property, which goes against the principles and precepts of the law of God. And we quote the law and the New Testament. Mm-hmm. Many Christians are interested in Marxism, socialism, communism, depending on who you ask, because it sounds wonderful. Everyone shares everything in common. Everyone works together for some common goal. It sounds great. But getting there is where it gets a little bit tricky, because that involves making a lot of people suffer, taking stuff, sometimes killing people if they refuse, if they don't work. What do you do with the people who don't contribute in your society? Do you kill them? Do you force them to work? The Soviets said, it's illegal not to work. So you have a lot of exciting things happening in such a country that people tend to overlook. It sounds wonderful at first, but in practicality can lead to a lot of suffering, death for sure, and ungodliness, definitely. Check out the episode.
And I think that if I saw an episode of Christians talking about communism, I'd probably think that it was a PragerU-esque or Fox News-esque. We are not. We're primarily a Christian channel talking about Christian theology. So this isn't just because Tucker Carlson told me to hate communism that we talked about it. Like Sebastian said, try to take a very fair approach to it. Mm-hmm. Talk about the actual ideology and some of the overblown aspects of it and why it's not a problem for some reasons and why it is for others. And so I encourage you, if you haven't already listened to it or you're blowing it off because it seems like it's going to be kitschy and like classic conservative talking points, we tried to not make it that. Sometimes the conservatives are right and sometimes they're not. But we're trying to come at from a purely Christian lens. And in the same way, it's politics season here in the U.S. Midterms are coming up. It's always politics season in the U.S., but midterms are coming up. And so I think personally why I support these episodes is I think it's important for Christians to realize that politics and religion are inextricably linked, because if you really believe the beliefs of your religion, and we are Christians, so if we really believe in God, of course it's going to have political ramifications. Like our belief in God is going to go out into the real world. We're going to actually show fruit of our Christianity. And as Jesus says in the Gospels, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. You don't hide a light under a bowl. You put it on a lampstand. It gives light to all who are in the house. So in that sense, if your politics is not affected by your religion, you clearly are hiding your lamp under a lampstand. That is not good. And when we see politics that aren't based in Christianity, we have to recognize them for what they are. Mm-hmm. It's not just that somebody read a textbook that we haven't yet, or they're just on the other side of the aisle, whatever that exactly means. It is a different religion. Sometimes we can tolerate lots of different forms of religion. So I would say that there's lots of genuine Christians who have different beliefs in politics. I get it, right? Where they're all slightly different. Like in the truest sense of a word, a religion is your practice of faith. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of religions that are totally agreeable to, like Christian religions that we all agree with. Me and Sebastian are technically different religions, but we're both the same big religion. We're both Christians, but he's Anglican and I'm Baptist. So in those ways, we're agreeable. And me and Sebastian don't perfectly align on politics. My brothers and sisters in Christ in my church don't perfectly align on my politics, and that's fine. But as long as we're in the same, like, credo. But there are those that are pushing political ideologies, which are, again, ultimately it's a religious thing, that are not in our credo. And we shouldn't be deceived, just like we shouldn't be deceived when a Mormon enters our neighborhood and says, I'm a Christian too, and let me tell you about Jesus Christ, whom I love. And oh, by the way, you have to abandon the God of your youth. You have to earn your salvation. You have to believe that you too will be a God one day. You have to accept all of these extra biblical things. And then at this point, this person is not a Christian, even if they claim to be. In the same way, you'll have people who claim to be Democrats and peace lovers and Christians, and they're supporting communism. And we were trying to show that, yes, Christians can be deceived by false religions like communism, but communism is fundamentally opposed to Christianity. And we're going to talk about fascism today.
Ooh. Fascism
is like way less popular than communism, so I think we probably won't have many people that are like, oh, you're wrong, stop hating on fascism. But fascism...
You never know.
Fascism, to me, and Sebastian's a bigger expert than I, fascism to me tried, and will still try, maybe it'll come back again, tries similar things to communism to convince Christians that it too is acceptable, or maybe even the virtuous belief. Just like Gnosticism attempted to glob onto Christianity and pretend that it was at least acceptable, at most the proper way to do Christianity, even though it was not. And that's surprising to some people, because you think of like, oh, well, obviously the Nazis and other fascists were anti-Christian, which they were. And so they weren't trying to convince Christians to join fascism for Christian reasons. And in the same way, communists were pretty anti-Christian too. But just like communists promote, they promote the portion of Acts where the Bible says that all the disciples sold everything they had, their land and everything, and shared everything in common as people needed it. It's like the Communist Manifesto in one line. Communists promote that and say, hey, Christian, here's a Christian reason to be communist. Fascists also say, like, hey, Christian, here's Christian reasons to be fascist. And although it's not as popular, and like fascist is a very dirty word, there are Christian movements today that are like Christo-fascists, or at least like fascist friendly, in that they don't adhere to all aspects of fascism. And I think some of them are genuine, faithful brothers and sisters in Christ that have been deceived by fascism. And so it's kind of hot on like the Christian right, conservative, disillusioned with Donald Trump movement right now. So it's worth talking about. So we're going to talk about fascism.
Yeah. Who's the biggest figure?
Hitler.
Well, yeah. I was going to say, yes.
Living figure? Okay.
In the U.S. that has identified himself as a corporatist, which is the economic model proposed for fascism. We'll get into all of that. Don't worry. I love that stuff. Nick Fuentes. Self-proclaimed Roman Catholic. Self-proclaimed corporatist. Some interviews that he has given. So he believes that you can harmonize those two ideologies.
Christianity and fascism.
Yeah. So let's see if that actually is the case. All right. Let's get something out of the way. When I love, because I did this in my class too when I taught on politics. Fascism used as a dirty word. 90% of the time, it's been my experience, people don't know what they're saying when it's called someone a fascist. And they've probably never encountered an actual fascist, but you see more and more of them recently. They're not all racist. Now, that might sound strange to you because you only hear that racist people that want an ethno-state are fascists. Not necessarily. Take this from a memorable quote from a famous someone. So, you might say, I am not racist. I have a woke friend. The woke friend in question. Race. It is a feeling, not a reality. 95% at least. Nothing will ever make me believe that biologically pure races can be shown to exist today. National pride has no need of the delirium of race. Benito Mussolini.
The fascist dictator of Italy during World War II, in case you're unfamiliar. So
yes.
There he is, being very not racist.
Yes, a very kind and accepting man for his time. Not because he did also a lot of horrible things. So let's now dive into fascism. Now that I got that out of my chest, I really
Yes, gotta get that quote in
yeah.
there. It's a good one.
Yeah, to get rid of those fake claims that people make. Okay, the year is 1910. Going into the 20s already. Marx is dead. Remember Marxism? He's dead. All the socialist groups are in disarray because someone like anarchists, they're like, we want communism now.
Mm-hmm.
Others say, like Trotsky, communism needs to be spread, Marxism needs to be spread by force through the government across all nations. And then you have gentle souls like Lenin, who would say, let's take it a step at a time and let's cooperate with other nations. Yes, let's mistreat our own people, let's take their stuff and kill them if they refuse, but let's do it internally. Let's be a big happy family in Russia, the Soviet Union. Okay, disarray, confused. You have communist revolutions. Bavaria, famous one, when the German Empire exploded after losing First World War. France, always flirting with socialism and communism. Okay. It's that world that this idea of nationalism begins to arise. The main nation that was disappointed with the outcome of the First World War was Italy. They sacrificed thousands of soldiers to hopefully gain some good land from the Austrian Empire. They got Istria, some island, some part of Dalmatia and Libya.
Mm-hmm.
They were very disappointed by that, just so you know. And then in Germany, you have Hitler feeding the emotions of the Germans who are scattered across other countries that used to be majority German-led, like the Austrian Empire. Now there's all these German minorities spread across non-German states. Mm-hmm. So there's this longing of being part of your nation. Okay, that's how nationalism spreads in this time. Here comes Giovanni Gentile, the founder of fascism. What a book. It is pretty confusing to read because he likes to ramble a lot. He's Italian after all, and it's just a style to ramble on about the same topic. His main points: capitalism, communism, they pretend to be in opposite ends. In reality, they're two sides of the same coin because they're materialistic, which is true. They actually are focused not on the spiritual side of humanity, but rather on proposing physical solutions to physical problems,
right? Like
how the economies run.
Mm-hmm.
Seizing the means of production, that's very physical, taking people's stuff and redistributing it. Okay, what you need now is another way to see the world. Materialism is bad, it's hedonistic. Capitalism, the capitalist creates and exploits for self-interest, and the proletariat this is the working class, want to rise up and seize the means of production. Also, it's for self-interest. So capitalists are egocentric. The workers are also egocentric because they're only caring about themselves. What about the nation? Would ask Mussolini or Gentile. Nobody thinks about the collective, the entire nation. And I use that word carefully, the collective. Okay. Both are individualistic, care about the self or your small little group, and they're bad, they're immoral. So how could it be that some people prosper and others suffer? A point that he brings up is the Great Depression. Both communists and capitalists suffered under the Great Depression. And this is the key point of fascism, that liberalism denies the role of the state for the sake of the individual. That's key. Remember that if you don't remember anything I'm saying, that it is the state who should get priority over individual rights, individual people. That's one of the main proposals of fascism, according to Gentile. The individual should serve the state, shouldn't be the other way around. So, the state is supposed to be all-encompassing. It's a bad word today. Totalitarian is what he used. Let's just say all-encompassing, to be more polite. The state needs to be all-encompassing. Every aspect of your life needs to involve the state. You as an individual don't exist. your values don't really exist outside of a state, of a society that defines these for you, that you find yourself in. That's defined by your surroundings, your society, the state, in other words. And the state is what creates both nations, laws, morals. All aspects of life are defined by the states. Now, I'm going to ask, and as I asked my class, why were, for many reasons, what was one of the reasons that you think, based on what I just said, that the Jews were disliked by the fascists in the 1920s? Think about the state nationhood. They didn't have a state. They didn't have a nation. There were all these people who are they loyal to the state? Mm-hmm. Who are they loyal to? So unfortunately, you would see in Germany that say they're only loyal to themselves. They're greedy, they're nasty, therefore we must get rid of them. Okay. Bad. Don't do that. It's evil. We'll talk about that. Okay. And what the people really need then is a new spiritual idea, a will, a conscious, a collective, would be words that Gentile uses. The state is a people, not just an idea, it's also a will. Your will must be aligned with that of the state. That's how you can achieve unity. What does what's the end goal of communism? Full equality. What's the end goal of fascism? Unity. What's the symbol of fascism? A bundle of sticks with an axe. The bundle meaning that all the branches, sticks together, are stronger as a collective than individually. Mm-hmm. That's the point.
It's an old Roman symbol of strength. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they adopted it.
Since fascist means stick, right? Like
the fascist, yeah. That's fascist. So, collective, unity, that's the main point of fascism. All right. Now, like any wonderful idea, it also needs to have practical implications. Mm-hmm. Like in communism, how we went over, if some people oppress others and we want to have equality, because that's what we value, then what do we do about the inequality? We go over that in the episode. Sometimes that means taking stuff from people that don't want to part with their stuff.
So what do we do to achieve unity?
Yes. Good question.
I have to say, honestly, very American framed here, I guess. I immediately don't buy the premises. I didn't get any facts. I don't know if Gentile like quotes facts or something, but he's promoting I'm going to use like fancy modern words, but the atomization of the individual. So the atoms are tiny things, right? The tiny individual parts of something. And so the fact that we're all separated and treated as individuals, he's arguing is the weakness of society. And like you actually don't benefit from everybody being atomized and not united because you're always like jockeying against your neighbors and fighting against your fellow man. And so the nation is hurting. And like a rising tide would raise all ships. So even if like I personally don't benefit from something that's better for the nation, we should always be pursuing what's best for everyone, with the minority exceptions, so that the most people benefit the most. Yeah. But I don't buy that. Whatever. I guess I will save the objections for later, but I would say the premises are flawed because I don't buy that. I don't buy that the atomization of the individual is actually making society worse. But you will. I think if you, dear Christian or viewer listening, should hear that that's a pretty common refrain today from Christians as well, is that we are being atomized by the New World Order or whatever, who is saying you'll own nothing and be happy, and like we need to coalesce as a Christian organization and fight back against the powers of darkness, and we need to be able to sacrifice individually and benefit collectively, and it gets into like protectionism and stuff. Anyways, I think you're hearing maybe where this is popular once again, even amongst Christians in America, let alone non-Christians, but there's non-Christians who are into like, it's not, I wouldn't call it Trumpian because Trump's not like the forerunner of all this, but like protectionists, collectivist mindsets.
I definitely see that collectivism, and I'll touch on this right now. The implications of seeking unity. If you have Marxists saying there's class struggle, and you see working class people rising up in other countries in Europe, like Bavaria, which it borders Italy, would have been right across the border. Hungary had a communist revolution that was crushed, and you see, that's really dangerous for our society, having a civil war revolution, as you saw in Spain, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then also you see the calamity that they blame the capitalist elites were the ones behind World War I, and they were the ones who were profiteering from the war. So you have a very small, according to the fascists, a small collective of bourgeois people, bourgeoisie, that have no regard for the nation. They only care about satisfying their own desires. And this also led to a Great Depression. You can see the people suffering in a depression. So they appeal to emotion a lot. And you can see how it will be easy if you are very hungry and you see there's people that are rolling in money and you see a revolution across your borders. You probably don't want any of that anymore in your country. And therefore you seek an alternative because you've been hearing capitalism, communism for years.
So how do you achieve the unity, this beautiful unity?
Yes. The industry, all industry should be organized into corporations. Different than the modern word that we use as a corporation, like just a really big company like Amazon corporation. He meant more of like guilds. Like you have the blacksmiths, you have the tailors, but modernized. You could have the medical sector. That's a guild, a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
So all the businesses in Italy, France, Spain, whatever, Germany, whatever country you find yourself in, are organized into these guilds. And who supervises them? Well, no other than the state, of course, because there's no your individuality, your will, your personality. It all comes from the state that has shaped you. Therefore, it should be the state who oversees these businesses to make sure that they're not exploiting the workers. And then the state also empowers the workers, the syndicates. Mussolini also dabbled into socialism before becoming a fascist, so just so you know. The unions in each corporation, in each guild, can voice their concerns to the state because the state supervises. They're part of the state. There's the state union syndicate. You have the Deutsche Arbeitsfront, for example, the German Workers' Front, which was the national syndicate in Nazi Germany.
Like every worker in Nazi Germany belonged to one union, and that is, however you say that.
Yeah,
German union.
Exactly. Private property remains though, so that's nice. But it's supervised by the state. In other words, if it benefits the nation, and you're surrendering your will, and we'll talk about the surrender of the will too, you will gladly give your property over for the benefit of the collective. Okay. So don't think of, as either capitalists would say or communists would say, it's not workers versus the bourgeoisie. That's wrong. No, let's forget about that. Rather, we should want to unite and have class harmony, not class conflict, but class harmony. What's the word that he uses is that the state is immanent in the lives of all citizens, always present. The government's always present in the lives of people. And probably you would say that worker unions should be managing business, should experience managing businesses to understand the difficulty. I thought that was interesting because he just takes a jab at communist revolutionaries in which, okay, we took over society, now what we do?
They don't have any experience in it.
Yes. Yeah. Famine, starvation, bad stuff happens. Okay. So, and I'm almost done, I promise. How does this translate not to what government? So if you have this new mindset that you want your people to have, you're all one in the state.
All in this together.
You're all in this together. You're all in this together. Whether in good or in bad, you're all in this together. Okay. True democracy is this. Fascism being the will of the people manifest in a council of fascism or one leader. I wonder who that leader would be in Italy. The guy telling you all of this stuff. Mussolini himself. So shameless. He was elected by a council of fascism, so he wasn't an absolute ruler. He was eventually deposed too. I'm not praising the man. I'm just saying that he wasn't omnipotent like Hitler or Franco were. Okay. what is the greatest test of virtue? War. Because capitalists want peace, and capitalists are bad because they just want to get money. They only want to profit, so they want peace at all costs, even if it means sacrificing the national interest and the resources of your nation just so you can have peace and they can have money. And socialists want internationalism, which is the erasure of all borders. That's evil. That's gross. Clearly, you can see their nations are people with identity. That's obviously bad. That's why would you get rid of something that's natural to humanity? He would say. Okay. And finally, the state guides morality and virtue. The individual is freed from all harmful liberties. For example, as my example, the pursuit of happiness. You don't have to strive in that sense for that because you're now free. If the state is the one who guides you, these things, you can now be truly free to pursue. These are fascist virtues: determination, the will to overcome, courage to fight, and vitality. And then how does this translate to international politics? Imperialism is the state showing its vitality. Just how you have individuals conquering, being a macho man in the frontier, chopping down trees, building a house for your family, taming the animals. How does the state look doing that? Oh yeah, you need to conquer the people. You need self-sacrifice and a sense of duty. And what is the ultimate goal? We say to create a new society. Fascism is revolutionary by definition. So revolution is necessary. You need to overthrow the previous sad capitalist communist system that you find yourself in to install a fascist one, Gentile would say. I paraphrase this, trying to make some sense of his ramblings. You look to the past to create a new future. I should coin that. And finally, I just thought it was funny. He says that capitalists and Marxists don't have the right to call fascism immoral since they are materialists. They don't talk about morality at all. So how dare you talk about spirituality and morality when you all the things that you care about is how the economy is run or what do you do with people's stuff. But that's where we come in because as Christians, we do talk about morality.
That's right. We're not capitalists only or communists only. Or at all. We are Christians, which obviously God has something to say about morals. And I kind of disagree. Capitalism and communism do promote morals, whether they have the right to or not. They do because they're religions in and of themselves. Okay, so we've now explained it. I think that what I gather from that, and you can correct or deny, Sebastian, is that fascism is less, as it prescribes itself, it's less of a strict set of rules and more of like general guidance for how nations should run philosophically, meaning fascism can look different, like a very different between different nations.
Yes.
It's just kind of like a guiding philosophy, less of a strict set of rules like Marxism.
If I could put it in simple terms, more vibes, yes.
Yeah, vibes. Which again, if I can just, if you have your ear on what is driving the youth, especially like the chronically online youth, male youth in the country, the U.S. right now, and maybe across Europe as well, it's vibes. It's like vibes of we're going to restore better years from yesteryear, and we are into macho man stuff and chopping down trees and big beards and stuff, and that wanes and ebbs and flows and all of that. But right now, it's on ascendant, and I would say that faction of disgruntled American male youth was kind of on the Trump train, and Trump isn't, for all intents and purposes, he's not a fascist proper, and so they're kind of disappointed by that, and so like more true fascists like Nick Fuentes or others are now off the Trump train, and they're on to, to true Scotsmen. There's never a true fascist. There's never a true American, never a true fascist, I guess. And so Trump wasn't good enough, and surely somebody else will be. They're always chasing the next thing. But it definitely is popular. So whether you call it fascism or we want to call it something else, like this, the thing that drove, whatever the animus that's driving fascism is also driving the movement now. So I don't know, like, if it's really fair, considering how tainted the term is, to call like Trump's movement or Nick Fuentes' movement like strictly fascist, because they don't really call themselves that, and like fascism clearly is like kind of permanently tied to Nazism. Like we can't, probably not in 100 years at least from now will we be able to separate the two. Yeah. So
I call Trump mercantilist.
He's mercantilist. but you can see the elements of fascism and why somebody might say, oh, you're a fascist because you are totalitarian or you believe in the government intervening in things. And like, I guess like fascism also does that, but it doesn't necessarily mean you are fascist. So I don't want to like over prescribe the fact that fascism is ascendant today, because it's not really, but like elements, the things that made fascism popular are popular today, and they are not good things, and we should talk about that.
Yes. I simply presented this to you in a nice, compact way, the ideology itself, and then what people are doing, what some call neo-fascism, is taking bits and pieces, stuff that they like, vibes again, things that they like from the movement, without embracing the whole, either fully the economic system, the political system. Like, I don't know if Nick Fuentes wants to overthrow the U.S. government. I don't know if he's satisfied with our republic. Maybe he has spoken. I don't know. Comment down below. But if you are a true fascist, yes, overthrow the U.S. government, get rid of the Constitution, redo everything, because that's what fascism advocates for. Racism, we're not going to talk about that too much, because that came and went depending on the country that you were in. Again, I started with a funny quote from Mussolini, because at least at the beginning, he was not a racist, and he thought the Nazis were gross for their weird obsession with ethnic purity. And likewise, Hitler thought Mussolini was a sad, pathetic man because he was not into racial purity as he should have been. And also, Italy's army sucked, but that's another story.
Yes. So I guess let's start with the positives and why this might snare Christians. Like, why is it popular right now? Why is it popular?
People feel dissatisfied with the state of the economy. I remember reading something that the statistics on the average age of homeowners, it's risen to, I want to say 56. So it's been going up. So clearly, people are not able to afford a home. Yeah. Whether that's good or bad, that's not beyond the point of this video. But people do feel dissatisfied with our financial situation. They believe that the current system, which sadly democratic socialist adjacent people call capitalism, the US right now has this much to do with capitalism. The only thing it has capitalism is like free trade. And even then, Trump is like, nope, tariffs. That's not free trade, by the way. I don't know what you call the US right now. It's now capitalistic.
I mean, it's got elements of capitalism, but it's got elements of fascism and socialism and all the rest.
Yes. So people are dissatisfied with what's perceived as capitalism. And then there are others who are disgusted by pure Marxism, whether it is for racial reasons, that they're disgusted with international socialism and communism, or they just don't like their idea of their stuff being seized, and they find ironic, because of what I just read, the fear of the means of production being taken over by the collective. But they like also the idea of conquering, being a strong young person, or in motherhood also. I didn't have so much about motherhood, but the fascists do write about the empowering women of being mothers and a traditional role of raising children. So that is attractive. Another nice thing that's attractive is the idea of order, stability, unity, for sure. Oh, and some mention this, usury. Some Christian usury commentators, say such a gross Jewish or like Judaizing thing that's pervades in the U.S. usury.
That is interest charging loans, in case you're unfamiliar with the term, which is banned in God's law. So the banning of usury is interesting. So that's something that some Christians vibe with the vibes of fascism. I think that the traditional roles, like it's overused, but the woke push in the U.S. for the last 20 years was so heavy-handed from media and the state that, and so obviously wrong to a lot of people, that the reaction to it is kind of anything that's not that is good. So anything that's not like pro homosexuality and like killing children and like obviously disintegrating the state, which is what like globalism and the US and like popular media was really pushing for the last 20 years. And that was like killing your kids and freezing your eggs and never marrying or marrying when you're like 48 and traveling the world and wasting all your money and not owning anything. And like all of that is so obviously wrong, or at least it's obviously wrong to a good contingent of people, including Christians, that as soon as they hear something that's saying, oh yes, we agree that that's bad, they're like, okay, I believe you. And that's what I feel like the fascism is really capitalizing on. Is it says, oh, do you agree that we shouldn't have pedophiles in government? And we're all like, yes. And it goes, okay, then you agree that we should have all these rules to stop corporations from doing this to us. And you're like, well, wait a second. Was it corporations doing this to us, or was it something else? And then the fascists insist it was corporations doing it to you, or like the weak will of limp-wristed cucks, and so we need to excise them from the state. And the only way to get rid of like weak-willed cucks is to expel the Jews and whatever else they might prescribe, and force people to breed. I don't know. I mean,
yes.
These are like extreme fascist positions. I don't think that every fascist is pro these positions, but anything that's reactionary against the obviously wrong way the state has been in recent years gets popular.
Yes.
I feel like that's really the root of it, is like any alternative to that, a third way, as the fascists called themselves in the 30s, is what's popular now.
Title drop right there on the episode.
The third way.
Yeah, the third alternative. And it sounds fresh. Because when was the last time anyone has publicly talked about seriously the teachings and doctrines of fascism?
Yeah, it's mostly just like Hitler bad, and so we never look at his actual beliefs.
Yeah.
Now, I would be remiss not to note that, as much as I don't like communism, the communist states lasted way longer than the fascist states. The fascist states burned in less than a decade, all of them, anyone that's been tried. And fascism is different than like regular old dictatorships, because there are like regular old run-of-the-mill dictatorships, as there are all across the world. At almost any given time, there's going to be some dictator. Fascism is like dictatorship on steroids. It's like a dictator with moral imperative to never hold back. Fascism says like it's good to be totalitarian. Like the point of the state is to be totalitarian, and so if you're ever tempted as a dictator to withhold yourself and to not trample on people's rights, like forget about it. You're actually doing the world a service if you do trample on people's individual rights, because you know best, and you, by nature of being a dictator, you must embody like the majority's opinion. Like Gentile, you said, it was like he was proclaiming to be the true Democrat because he's enforcing the will of the majority on the nation. But like to go into the negatives, I think the obvious one is that you just don't know if you are actually the will of the majority. And to quote the founding fathers here, we don't want a democracy in its true form, because if 51% of people tell the other 49%, hey, I want your house, in like a true democracy, or I guess in a true fascism, they just take it. And is that good for the state? Is it good for the state that the 51% just took everything from the 49%? No, it's not. It's not an efficient way to run an economy. It's just the way, like, it's pure math.
Aha. You are correct to notice. Therefore, that's why you need a council of the wisest, the strongest people in your nation to run this and make sure that everyone is harmoniously aligned in the same goals. Whether you need to beat them up a little bit for them to align, or they willingly submit, that's another story. We can also just have one guy who represents the whole will of the nation and guides everybody. And everyone's happy because they're being guided.
Yeah, I mean, we could hash out again. This would get more like PragerU-y, so apologies. Fox Newsy to like go out and why this doesn't work in practicality. I mean, look at the evidence yourself and see that Nazi Germany and fascist Italy both failed spectacularly, economically, societally. Like everything they tried to do was bad. The wars they fought, everything they did was not efficient. With some of the greatest nations in the world, mind you, like Germany and Italy were some of the greatest nations in the world, still are kind of. But let's talk from a Christian perspective.
Yes.
So we could talk about like the socioeconomic reasons why these things failed. But is this philosophy of unity and promoting virtue, which some of the virtues align with Christianity, is it at least compatible with Christianity? Like, can you be a Christian and a fascist at the same time? The answer is no.
Yeah.
Why? What do you think the main thing is, Sebastian? We've got a bunch of scriptures pulled up, but what do you think that the most glaring reason why Christianity and fascism are not the same?
Dear viewer, take this to heart. In fascism, if you put the state at the center of everything, morality, virtue, what gets done, what doesn't get done, you're putting the state in the place of God, or worst case scenario, above of God. So best case scenario, it's equal to God. Bad. It's above God. Oh, now the state gets the right to redefine what religion is and what you should believe in, which is what was happening in Germany with the resurgence of paganism and Hitler's hatred. And was it not Goebbels?
Himmler.
Yes, well, they all hated Christianity, sure, but there was, I forget, the Nazi propagandists that loved neo-paganism. Anyway, the state reserves the right to define the belief system. And what is the commandments in the laws of God? You shall have no other gods before me. Anything could be a not just a deity in your mind, but could be a statue, could be literally anything that you have in the place of God.
Yeah.
Already fail, not even C-. Just fail already.
I wish we had the quote. I think if you read it to me before, maybe it is in your notes. We didn't quote it, but there's a quote. I don't know if it's from Gentili or some fascist, but it encapsulates that idea the most to me. It's some like super big brother statement, but he means it positively, of like, the state is your mother, the state is your father, the state is your God, the state is, it's like everything, the state is everything. And it expressly says God, like it is intending to replace God. Italy allowed you to be Catholic, but if Catholicism and the state's mandates ever conflicted, it was always the state. The state gets to win. And so I would go to 1 Samuel 8 here. There is a section in 1 Samuel. So when the people of Israel are in Judges and they've been going through good and bad, if you know your Judges in Bible, when the people demand a king. And as you may know, some good kings, some bad kings, and like God allows them to have a king. King David is a king, is blessed line of Jesus. Jesus comes from the line of kings, so you may be tempted to think that the king like was inevitable and good. But here's what Samuel responds. The people say, this is 1 Samuel 8. But when they said, "Give us a king to lead us," this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king, as they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are doing to you." Now notice, here, pause here. God, one, takes this as an affront to him. So if you ask for a king above God, obviously you want not God, but the king. So when you ask for fascism, you don't want God, but a king instead, whatever, maybe a single person, maybe a council of people, whatever, but you're asking for somebody above God to own your life. You are rejecting God. But God doesn't even just call it, "You're rejecting me as their king." He also says, "They have forsaken me and served other gods," i.e. the king in this case it's a god. They're searching for another god. When you ascribe to fascism, you are submitting yourself before a false god. Unlike communism, I don't think communism really has this same problem, because communism has lots of things wrong with it, as we talked about, lots of breaking of God's law, but it doesn't often, by its definitions, it doesn't purport to be God. It allows you to have some individual liberties. There are some things that communism doesn't touch. They just want to own the economic things, which they don't have the right to per God's law, but whatever. That they are not asserting themselves as God. But fascism is explicitly asserting itself as God, which is exactly what a king might do, and so God says as much. And still in 1 Samuel 8, Samuel gives the warnings that the curses of having a king. And here are the curses, and I'd like you to note the curses and what would be considered very bad, like the problems with having a king. Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said this: "This is what the king will reign over you, will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. Pause. This is apparently a pro in fascism.
Yes.
To Samuel, to the Bible, to God. This
Dying
is a
for your
curse.
Nation, fighting for the glory of your state. Yes.
Right. To God, this is a curse. This is a punishment for having taken a king. To the fascists, they say, yes, give me more punishment. I want to see more of my sons die in the king's chariots. This is a great thing. Samuel says this is a curse of taking a king. It is a natural consequence of giving your rights to a king. So it is, I guess there's some naturalness in the fascist state saying we're going to use your sons to go to war because they will. But it's not a good thing. He goes on in Samuel. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. Pause. Another fascist ideal, and it seems like Christians cheer this one on because in response to the like total rejection of femininity that the modern age tried to put on for a bit of like, no women can stay home and no women should have children and you should be out making, be boss girl money. And then all the like trad reactionists are saying, no women in the workplace. My wife's going to stay in the kitchen. And it's good that they are, I'm going to use the words of the perfumers and cooks and bakers for the state, because at least those are feminine pursuits. No, I mean, not to get into my wife stays at home and like there's perfectly good things to being a perfumer or baker or whatever for the sake of your family, but the state, like just because those are feminine things, you might be tempted to say, well, the state has this good interest in mind for women because it's asking them to do feminine things that benefit the world and the nation. It's still a curse because the state is the one reaping the rewards from that and forcing daughters to do this. So note again, all these things are curses. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take a tenth of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants. Your male and female servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. And this clearly speaks to taxes, and and more than taxes is like eminent domain and the ability for the state to seize whatever you want. Again, this is a curse. 10% tax, 10%, which is pitifully small in comparison to American taxes today. 10% is considered an unbearable curse that people will be crying out for relief from, because it is heavy. It's as much as God demands. God demands 10%, and now the king is demanding another 10%. The Italian state, the fascist state, they demand everything, 100%. They reserve the right to take any of your land, any of your money, not up to a tenth of your flocks, all of it. So it's at least 10 times worse. And maybe it's exponential because the logarithmic curve of pain here. But this description, I think, is enough to say that fascism and Christianity are at least at odds. That Christianity calls these things evil and fascism calls them virtues.
Yeah, it's all fun and games when you have this cool new dictator that's establishing a new society until that guy either dies, retires, or goes crazy, and now you have a clown running the show, and you've given him infinite power to do whatever he or she wants.
Mm-hmm. And I would say we've had this conversation before on the podcast, but often when the government is doing bad things, we just have to sit by and take it. They are our appointed leaders, and they're not given the sword in vain and all the Romans 13 New Testament stuff. However, these are the lines where I would say, per the Bible, the authority, the sphere of authority that God has given to kings, so the most authoritative kind of government, human government, is limited to these things at most. And so if a government is doing more than these things, i.e. if they're taking more than 10% of your taxes, they're doing anything that's not noted here, it's above and beyond their sphere of influence, and a Christian has the right to refuse. It calls for wisdom, right? Should you refuse? What are the consequences of refusing? Like, is it actually worth keeping your money to refuse the state right now? I would say not yet, although it calls for wisdom of when that might be. But you would be morally, godly justified, I believe, in refusing to give the government more than what he allots the king here. And so all the more, fascism is just not right.
It's already at odds with this.
What's some more scripture here? Why it might be unaligned with Christianity?
Should we stay in the Old Testament? Yeah,
sure.
Leviticus 19. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time, or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God.
Note that any law from God is like intrinsically at odds with the state, because this is a law from God, not from the state. But two, it says leave the gleanings for the poor and the foreigner.
Yeah.
Somebody who's out, like that. If the foreigner is defined as anything, it's somebody who's outside of the state, and yet here the state is giving to something that's not in the state. It's like, again, totally at odds with fascism.
Do not steal. Already.
Blam.
Yeah.
Even the king can't steal.
Do not lie.
Which, I don't know. I mean, fascism, I guess, like has some virtues, but I think fascism would be like fully pro lying if it benefits the state.
Yeah.
Like propaganda and whatever else.
Yeah, but it runs some propaganda. A lot of gaslighting. That's the term.
Yeah.
We're not losing the war. We've got this. Oh, I've watched the movie Downfall, but I forget the name of the general. Yes, as long as this general just makes it across the river, Berlin will be saved. No, Berlin will not be saved. Do not deceive one another. Do not swear falsely by my name, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Do not defraud or rob your neighbor. Do not hold back the wages of hired worker overnight.
Which, if you know anything about your histories of these labor unions, as much as they reported to be pro the members of the union, they didn't know how to properly help their members, and so absolutely they would hold back wages of their hired workers overnight. Now, lots of companies do that today. Not a lot of companies out there paying their workers every day, but the law of God would be at odds with practices otherwise.
Yep. Do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block in front of the blind, but fear your God. I am the Lord. Speaks on the perception of people who are either ethnically, in their eyes, not what we say, ethnically inferior, or just physically a burden to the state. On the pro side of communism, depending on the communists, they would say these poor people they're part of a community, they must be helped.
Yeah,
you need to work harder for them. They will still be doing something. I guess you could do some work around in a fascist states, in a very kind, gentle fascist state, but most they were pro getting these people either off the streets or just off of this life.
Yeah, I mean euthanasia for invalids. Yes. At
odds with this. Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. What would say? If your goal is to protect the state at all costs, are you going to be impartial in your ruling?
No, and you will applaud yourself for not being impartial. I think, again, a problem with a fully totalitarian mindset like fascism, to me, is that everything you do as the state is justified. And so if you do decide to show partiality to the great over the poor in the case of fascism, you don't even need to justify yourself. You say, yeah, it is good to do this because it benefits the state. So in this way, you sear your conscience. You sear the conscience that's trying to tell you otherwise, that you should judge people based on a standard of the law and not the whims of the state.
Yeah. Or you could say, this great person has achieved his or her station and therefore has the right to trample weaker, lesser people underfoot, whether they're native or foreign. Do not go about spreading slander among your people. Do not do anything that endangers your neighbor's life. I am the Lord. Such as invading Czechoslovakia, invading Poland, Denmark, Norway, the Soviet Union, France, England, all at the same time.
I mean, and mundane things like setting up, like the state decides to use eminent domain to create an iron mine right next to somebody's house with no safety checks. Like in a fascist state, they're totally entitled to do whatever they want, including evil things. And so if it endangers the neighbor's life, God says, I am the Lord, right? Juxtaposed to I am the state, or whatever Louis XIV might say, or some dictator from some fascist country might say. God is saying all these things I'm telling you because I am the Lord, not the state, not the king, not somebody else. And that's why when the Israelites reject God as their king, they reject his law because it's all based on him being the Lord. And so too, if you acquiesce your rights to the state, you are abandoning God for a different one.
Do not hate a fellow Israelite in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you will not share in their guilt. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Keep my decrees.
So there you go. I mean, it's just a smattering of the law. It's really just a cut segment of the law. But any portion of the law, to me, is fundamentally opposed to fascism because it's based on the Lord saying things, not the state.
Mm-hmm.
But some of these also just show that the rights reserved by the fascist state would be at odds from God's law because God puts restrictions on what anybody can do, including the state, like not defrauding neighbors or not cursing the deaf or making sure to provide for the foreigner, which is not only does the fascist state reserve the right to not do that, they also say you should not, because you should own the state's prerogative should only be caring for and bettering the state. That's like the whole point of fascism is isolating those you benefit so that you can focus on their well-being and like intentionally punishing those outside the state for the betterment of the state, hence all the war stuff, whatever. And it's obviously not in line with this portion of God's law.
Exactly. And what do we have from here? From Exodus?
This is the becoming Jewish. Where even is it?
I think it's at the very bottom. Oh, there it is.
We scroll down, sorry. Finding our scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
Some fascist countries.
Yeah, either fascist countries or you even have people here that like some of these principles. They're fascism is solely focused on the nation and the people within. How does that get expressed today? Some people adjacent to this movement, they want a United States which sounds wonderful, only for Americans. What does that mean? You may ask these people. The answer varies. Some might say only people of Anglo-Saxon heritage. Some might say only of white heritage. Some might say it could be anybody as long as you become Christian. The answer varies. Let's read it from Exodus, what it says. A foreigner residing among you who wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover must have all the males in his household circumcised. Then he may take part, like one born in the land. No uncircumcised male may eat it. The same law applies both to the native born and to the foreigner residing among you. What can I take from this is that any person can be part of God's family, one, because that was the way to be part of God's family in the Old Testament, in the Old Covenant, but can be part of the nation that you're in. I don't see any restrictions on ethnicity or which country you come from.
Right.
In this, you could be Roman, you could be Greek, you could be Scythian, you could be from India, you could be from China. As long as you fulfill this law, you're now part of the kingdom of Israel in the Old Testament. And such was the case of Ruth, Moabite, right?
Yep.
She became a Jewish, mainly by conversion, and she's counted amongst the righteous.
And in the line of Christ.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would say I am pro-nationalism in that we are to seek the good of the nation we've been placed in. This is a line from God speaking to the Jews and they're going into exile. There are also lines that say don't do that. So I guess it calls for wisdom, but also for specific times in Esther. However, the general line is like I'm pro-nationalist because I want the best for the United States, because I want the best for all peoples, and God has placed me in the United States. He's placed you in the United States. Anybody who's here, should pray for the benefit of the nation that you're around, treat people well, work well, for the sake of God, respect the authorities. Like all of that to me is nationalist. What I'm not, and I think Christians have been deceived into thinking, is that it is necessarily bad for the nation and therefore anti-nationalist, and therefore we should be against allowing foreigners to enter or become citizens inside of the country that we're in. I.e., there are some Christians, and I think they are faithful Christians for the most part, but this is like a bad ideology, would believe in I think the gentlest way to say it is like heritage Americans, but some semblance of like the people who originally founded the nation should be the only ones be allowed to become Americans. And even people who are perfectly culturally aligned to become Americans, i.e. they are Christians, they want to better this nation, they have the same ideas for bettering this nation that we do, we should bar them from joining this nation because they aren't ethnically ours. Even if they are like in some ways ethnically the same in that they like come from France or something, right? And like they're French people, they're white, right? Like things you traditionally associate with being American. We shouldn't let them become Americans because they weren't here like from the year 1900 and back. I think that's like heritage Americans. People want to like cut it to what the closing of the frontier. I don't know, some ambiguous time where we decided America was America, which to some extent is wise because a lot of that heritage Americans believed the same things culturally, and so there's some like cultural unity there around God's law. But on the other end, it's not wise because heritage Americans have all sorts of different beliefs culturally right now, including total hatred of God, including all the wicked things that we decry, the limp-wristed, woke stuff. Like, that really wasn't pushed by foreigners. It was pushed by heritage Americans. And so are we going to better the nation by solidifying that and not allowing like the righteous to enter our land? I don't think so. And so I'm pro nations wanting to benefit themselves. I'm pro Canada being pro Canada and the United States being pro United States. Like, let's all pursue the betterment of our own peoples. I think that's our calling. That's the sphere of authority for the state. But as Sebastian was just saying, and as we read from Exodus, we shouldn't bar Christianity from those who want to join. But I would say we shouldn't, in the same principle, we shouldn't bar people who want to join our nation that are aligned with our nation from joining our nation. Like, that is not going to disadvantage us. It's in the same way that we allow converts to enter Christianity, we should allow converts to enter America. Now, if somebody won't convert, right, they won't have their whole household circumcised, whatever the equivalent is to become an American, then, you know, I think the nation holds the right to have borders and choose who becomes a citizen. Like, we don't have to let everybody in who wants to be, but there should be tolerance, like a way for you to convert essentially to becoming an American.
It's just a reaction to having complete open borders and let anybody in for the past decades to now, nobody comes in. Use wisdom.
And also, you know, what cuts both ways here in this line from Exodus is that no uncircumcised males may eat at the Passover. I mean, this is clearly it's specific to Passover, so maybe you don't like that we're using this, but I think it's indicative of like all the law of God. Here, the same law applies both to the native-born and to the foreigner residing among you, i.e., there will be native-born Israelites. And if we translate it to today, again, this is just principles, it's not a hard law, but the principle today to Americans, if we're talking about the United States, if there are native-born United Statesians who are uncircumcised, they are haters of American culture, like good American culture, haters of God, haters of God's law, whatever, the state should reserve the right to uncitizenize those people. The same law should apply both to the foreigner and the non-foreigner. So I really don't care if somebody's a heritage American. If they hate America, they hate the state, they hate God, go away. That's what I would say. Now, I would be pro limiting the rights of the state and whatever. Like, I wouldn't be kicking these people out because I think there's other problems to allowing the state to just like straight deport people that are American citizens. However, I'm not pro heritage Americans just because they are heritage Americans, right? Just because they've been here since the year 1900. They should be circumcised in the way that you might be modernized. They should be pro the betterment of the nation they're in.
Wise words.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this one was a nice one. Still in the Old Testament. On the limits of, going back now, limitations on government. Do not move your neighbor's boundary stones set up by your predecessors in the inheritance you receive in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess. It's from Deuteronomy 19. We don't have the same boundary markers because we don't live in the kingdom of Israel as Christians. The principle from this law that God gave to his people back then is that there is a concept of private ownership. Take that, communists. And then also that you should not be messing with that. You should not be messing with your neighbor's property, with their items. then you have laws do not steal, which implies that some things belong to you and other things belong to others.
Mm-hmm.
Novel concept. But if you give the state unlimited power, even if that's not your, but you're thinking, oh, I don't like Mussolini, he was unhinged, I don't want that. The more power you give to the state, if you like fascism, is that the state will violate God's law and infringe on the right of private ownership of people.
Yeah.
There you go.
I also think
himself.
There's a law right under this one, also in Deuteronomy 19. I mean, every law of God is really at odds with fascism because it's a law from God, not from the state. But here's another one. One witness is not enough to convict anyone accused of any crime or offense that they have committed. A matter must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Simple law, quoted by Jesus. Jesus uses this law when he says that it's not just him testifying that about the Father, but the Spirit and the Father, like all 3 members of the Trinity, are witnessing about the truth of Jesus and his words. And so you should believe him, because if it was just him, maybe you wouldn't need to, but this is being established by 2 or 3 witnesses, so says the law. In the state's case, not only, again, does the state reserve the right to basically do whatever it wants, and so it doesn't have to listen to any of these laws, which is non-godly, it's ignoring God's law, but the state is, like, in all respects, especially like in the ideal fascist state, one witness. It is the collective singular witness. Yeah, that's the whole point, is that it's like a singular animus of the people's will. And so it could never convict. It would, by God's law, never be able to convict anybody of crimes, because it is but one witness.
Yeah. This might come in handy for those who like corporatism, in which who arbitrates between disputes between the workers and the business owner? The state. Who's the witness? And the arbiter of truth? The state.
Only the state, and there's only one witness. Like, it really doesn't matter what other evidence is brought to bear, though. Only the state is the decider, only one witness, which is not as it should be. And principally, I mean, you could get into why we think God prescribes these laws. I think because people are flawed, right? We don't want one witness determining crimes because he could be lying. The very next law in this law piece is, if a malicious witness takes the stand and accuses somebody of a crime, here's what to do, right? That this is clearly a concern. We shouldn't believe them. And as fascism would prove out, the state deciding things without other witnesses is the cause of all sorts of evil in fascism, because they often decided the wrong things. There'd be corruption, and so somebody would be corrupt and decide the wrong thing because they had total power. Nobody could oppose them, and they do something really bad. Like, the wickedness of people's hearts, unfettered by law, is very bad and destructive. And we have but one more piece of evidence, but again, I think you'd see that replacing God with the state is bad. There's a lot of, like, nuance to fascist arguments that make you think that, oh, maybe they're going to promote godly virtue, and, like, we want a refrain in the Christian right, the pro-fascist Christian right now, is that it would be really good if the United States were to have the equivalent of Francisco Franco, the old fascist dictator from Spain, come and rule in the United States, because Francisco Franco was a devout Catholic, and he purged a lot of, like, immoral, anti-God, communist, free-love people from Spain, which was a problem in Spain, and is again, now that Francisco Franco is gone. Tells you maybe the heart of the people. But he did. He purged, like, immorality, lots of kinds of immorality from Spain, and so they long for the equivalent of the U.S. to come and purge all the immorality which is in the U.S., which, you know, there's lots of immorality. However, when you bow to that kind of God, you do make the Francisco Franco figure God. You make the state a God. So you are longing for, you hate the current God of the United States. Okay, granted, you know, so do I, right? The current God of the United States is some amalgamation of weird syncretism between all sorts of different religions, and that's evil, and as witnessed by a lot of the fruit of the United States. However, hating Marduk is good, but then loving Asherah as a replacement for Marduk isn't, like, you're just replacing one god with another. Yeah, maybe Asherah is better than Marduk at some things. Like, maybe Asherah isn't asking you to kill your kids in the fire, but she's still a false god. Mm-hmm. And she's still going to do bad things, and witnessed by all the bad things she's done before, witnessed by all the bad things fascism has done before, and for Spain. I don't want a Christian dictator in the United States, because he will do wrong. Like, he may do more right than the current God of the United States, and in that way, like, oh, it's incrementally better, but I would never acquiesce to him being my God. And I don't want the U.S. to be in that kind of state either. At the very least, even though there may be some people who worship the state in the United States, the government is not requiring worship of the state. So I don't want them to.
Yeah, I would say take a look at our current leadership. Not to give meat to the liberals out there, Trump tends to govern in a way that is by definition more authoritarian.
Mm-hmm.
Is he a dictator? No. Is he more authoritarian? Yeah, in many ways he is. Imposing his will on stuff that he wants to do. Sometimes he forgets what he wants to do and then he does random stuff. Many people are really disappointed with Trump, people that used to like him. And that's because he's a man. He's growing old. He's growing senile. And it's fine to grow old and senile. That's just part of human nature, part of the fall. What I hope you gather from this is that when you give someone a lot, not even unlimited power, the amount of power that the US president has right now, people are already dissatisfied with that, and he does pretty weird stuff and things that hurt the nation overall too. Imagine how worse that would be if you give him even more power than what he has now. And imagine if the leader was far more vicious, wicked, evil, and Machiavellian than the current president. So for all the people that call Trump a fascist, imagine if he was an actual national socialist.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Or if he was allowed to be, at least. Like, I guess we don't know the secrets of his heart, but he because of the limits in the United States government right now, praise God, he can't be a fascist because he doesn't have total control of everything, right? But there are people who clamor, and any president, they want the people who love the president want the president to have more power. And so whether it was Barack Obama or George Bush, or I don't know who's clamoring for Joe Biden to have more power, but Donald Trump, definitely lots of people wanted Donald Trump to, like, if only we could give him more power, all the pedophiles would be gone, we would have destroyed Iran and whatever, all the list of things that we could have done if only he had more power. And that's whether or not that's true, it don't make the president your God. That's the call of the Bible. Don't exchange the king God for some earthly king that you're putting your hope in.
Yeah. Samuel. People thought Saul would be a wonderful king until he became old, senile, and just went crazy.
That's right.
Wow. Don't put your hopes in a human leader. All that, I think, be fine to quote this from Matthew 22. It immediately came to mind when planning this. And Jesus said to his opponents, when they asked him, who should we give the taxes to? So give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. What does this highlight? There's a realm in the political sphere, and there's also a domain in which God is involved. Now we can say God is totalitarian because he's everywhere, he's immanent, he's in all places all at once. Mm-hmm. But he has given, for the sake of order in this life, human government, a realm to act upon, as we read from the Old Testament, some examples. So there's a distinction. And I don't think I'm crazy if I would say that Jesus thought that Yahweh takes a more important role than government or literally anything else that a human could come up with. So there's a distinction, and God, as we've seen from the Old Testament laws, God takes precedent over anything else that humans could want or carry out.
Mm-hmm. So I know we're long running here. I hope you get an impression of both why people might be tempted to fascism, why it's important to know about it so that you can respond lovingly to Christians or non-Christians who bring up tenets like it that just are not against God's law, or that are not in line with God's law. Hopefully also we've given enough scripture for you to be equipped, dear listener, with some things to question people who are pro giving the state more power, in a loving way, in a way that is united in Christ, so that fellow Christians, we share not everything in common, but we do share the Bible in common, which should be our everything. And so hopefully using scripture to talk about these things is a uniting thing for your exchanges with somebody who might be trapped in like a fascist ideology or something akin to it. Leave us your comments if you disagree, because we're happy to talk about it. Mm-hmm. You can go crazy there. We do love a good crazy comment session. We will be examining capitalism as well in weeks to come, so don't think that we are just pro the current state of America right now. We have our quips and stuff as well. I would personally, if you've watched me for any number of years, you'll know that very pro God's law. I think that God's law cuts both ways as far as like cuts fascism, communism, whatever, like the classic things Americans hate, but also cuts loved things that Americans love. That shows to me that it's not just my bias as a nationalistic American showing that I love God's law regardless of the things that it disagrees with Americans on or agrees with them on. So I would promote you, dear listener, if you are wondering what is the best political system, to read through God's law and see what God prescribed Israel, with all the caveats that yes, it was ancient Israel, yes, we aren't Israel today, yes, we are Christians under a government that's not a Christian government, so there's like all that. But look at what God prescribed to Israel. That was a perfect law, and Israel couldn't live up to it. So there's all these questions of like what's practical to prescribe today. I get it, but at least look at what God prescribed, see what is a perfect kind of law, pray for the return of Christ when he will institute a perfect law on earth. And faith should lead to action. It should inform your politics. So at least whatever you end up voting for, at least do it with a proper heart, of not putting your hope in things that aren't good, or hoping for things that aren't good. That's even worse.
Yes, do not be seduced by ideas and ideologies that have been either directly opposed to God's law or sneak their way in like Gnostics. Pretend to be somehow aligned with God, and then surprise, once they're in power, I am God now. Please worship me. Do not be seduced by these ideas, because they tend to creep up all the time. And that's why we're going over all of these ideologies here at the podcast. Not just because it's fun for me, and hopefully for Michael, but so that we can all be more responsible in our political thinking. And if God does indeed speak on the matter, which, as you've heard us say, we obviously believe he does.
And if we're really treating this like a false religion, which I think we ought to, just like we do, and we've recommended for basically every religion that we talk about here that's not Christianity, we would highly advise for evangelism purposes, if this is something that somebody is talking to you about, or you find somebody who's like a passionate fascist or communist or whatever, some political ideology, it's good to be equipped with the kind of knowledge, the background of what fascism is, or communism is, or what Buddhism is, or what Mormonism is. You don't need to walk that person through an hour and 16 minutes of background of what fascism is and why it's opposed to the Bible. Just know one or two things that make the person question their belief and immediately tie it back into the gospel. I think the most effective way of evangelizing somebody, if they are pro-fascism, right, is to make them question it, right? Is that really aligned with what God says here? Or if God says, give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's, doesn't that separate the two things? There is some things that are Caesar's and some that are God's. And then bring it back to the gospel, right? If that is true, I believe what Jesus says, and Jesus is the King of all. Jesus pays for sins, and bring it, use it as an evangelism tool, but don't get caught in the back and forth of the politic exchange, especially if you only have like a couple minutes to talk to somebody. You don't want them leaving stewing on what sociological facts they should bring to you next time. You really want them stewing on, did God really say that? Like, I should go check the Bible. You want them leaving wanting to read the Bible, or wanting to question God, wanting to accept the gospel, instead of stewing on like what facts they need to bring next time to beat you in a debate.
Amen.
And that's why we found our cause in serving the Lord Jesus Christ. Yes, I think that's my end line. Man, it's been a while. I've been Michael, the man behind the machine, and to my right, your left has been
Sebastian, the archivist.
Thank you for listening. If you want to see the rest of our episodes, you got to go to Found Cause on YouTube. We're also on Facebook. We're also on Spotify and iTunes and wherever else you might find your podcasts. Until next time, but we talk about something related, probably. We usually do every other as a response video. I don't know. Cadence has been off recently. So we may do in the very next episode a reaction to capitalism. Thank you for listening. Bye.